Oh, yes, sir. There we go. There he is. This fish in the boat. In this video, I really want to talk about one of my all-time favorite lures out there, which is a flutter spoon. A flutter spoon to me is still a very underutilized bait, and it is a bait that when the bass get on it, there are days where they will not bite anything else. Like, you have to be throwing a spoon in order to catch fish. And even with the new advances of technology, with little forward-facing sonar minnows and things like that, I've seen a lot of days out there on the water where they won't touch a little minnow bait, but they will clobber a spoon. So in this video, I really want to do a deep dive on the flutter spoon. I really want to talk about what actually makes a good spoon, like what, with all the different brands out there on the market, how can you pick a spoon off the shelf and know that this is the one that's going to catch bass? I also want to talk about the equipment, because the thing about spoon fishing, these baits are pretty heavy. It is very easy for a bass to throw them. And so in order to land more fish, to catch a lot of bass on a spoon, you have to have the right equipment in order to get them in the boat. And obviously we're gonna talk about how you actually go about fishing this bait. It is not just a one way of fishing this bait. There's actually multiple ways to fish a spoon. And depending on what time the year is, may kind of dictate how I'm going to fish it. So let's go ahead and dive deep into spoon. Now, the first thing I want to talk about, what makes a spoon a good spoon? Like I said, there are a ton of different spoons out there on the market. And to be honest, most of the spoons are very similar in shape. They are very similar in action. The biggest thing about spoons that I have found that the bass like, not necessarily the fishermen, because we all know that fishermen can get hung on certain baits. But when it comes to what the bass actually like, there are two characteristics that I look for in a spoon. The first characteristic, one of the most important thing is, it is very important to have a number of different sized spoons. As you can see, I have a big 8-inch Ben Parker Magnum spoon right here. I have a little River to Sea worldwide spoon right here. Here's another different spoon. One of the biggest things that I have seen that bass will really get fixated when it comes to fishing a spoon is simply the size of the bait. You will go out there and you're fishing baits like this, a 3-inch bait, maybe a bait like this, a 5-inch bait, and you're just not really catching a lot of fish. You're not really getting much of a reaction. And then all of a sudden you switch over to a Magnum size spoon, like this is an 8-inch, or maybe even the 6.5-inch. And all of a sudden it is like the bass have never seen a lure before. They are absolutely crushing this thing. They're hitting it super hard. You're catching a ton of fish, and it really doesn't make sense, but it all comes down to the profile of that bait, especially on lakes where you have, gizzard shad. Gizzard shad can get really, really big, and some of the biggest bass in our bodies of water will eat those gizzard shad. Sometimes that is where the really big spoon plays. So anytime that I think that I'm going to get on a spoon bite, one of the biggest things that I like to do is have some sort of big spoon with me, either the 6.5-inch Ben Parker like mini mag or the actual Magnum spoon. Now, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, there are days out there where the bass want a little spoon. Now, there's a lot of really good little spoons out there on the market. This is a Nichols Lure Lake Fork spoon. This is a really, really good one that I like. It's a 4-inch one. This is the River to Sea one that I was just holding up. Also a really, really good one. There's even smaller spoons. There are little 2-inch flutter spoons. And sometimes in the late summer, when bass are really fixated on small bait fish, a lot of those really small, tiny shad, the young of the year shad are everywhere. That is when the little spoons can really, really play. Now, obviously, you would think that when fish are eating big bait, they want the big spoon. When fish are eating little bait, they want the little spoon. And that does happen, I would say, most of the time. But I always keep a lot of options on the front deck. Personally, I have 3 spoons. Like if I think I'm on a spoon bite, if I think I can catch fish on a flutter spoon, I will have 3 different flutter spoons rigged up. And that way I can kind of rotate through them to see which ones the bass want, because they will get so specific on what spoon that they want, really according to the size of the bait. Now, the second main characteristic, this is one that I have found to be huge, and I do not know when the right time is to throw it, but the rate of fall of your spoon is really, really important. You know, and what I mean by the rate of fall, some of these spoons, for example, this is a little 5-inch nickel spoon. This spoon and this is another 4-inch nickel spoon. These spoons right here, when they flutter down, because you rip these things off the bait, we'll talk about how to fish them here in a minute. But when you rip them up and they fall back down, when you are letting them flutter to the bottom, some of these spoons, like these ones, will fall really, really slow. And some days out there, the bass want a really, really slow fall. Other spoons, for example, like this big Magnum spoon, or even the River to Sea spoon, these ones are a little bit thicker. Like you can literally see that they are thicker, and they fall a lot faster to the bottom. And I'm telling you what, that fast fall to the bottom at days is everything. It is absolutely everything out there. To get it to fall really fast right through those fish, it will cause a reaction strike. Now, again, when I go out there on the water, I usually try to figure out the size that the fish want most. And a lot of times you're going to be able to figure out the size by simply rotating through some spoons and seeing which one the fish are responding to, which one you're actually catching fish. The next thing that I will mess around with, again, is the weight of them or the rate of fall. You know, for example, these spoons are pretty similar in size. So maybe I find out, hey, they're on a 3 to 4 inch bait like this. These two spoons though act very different. And so again, that is the next step in the process, figuring out the rate of fall. And that is how you can kind of critique your bait down to get it to where you can actually go out there and catch a lot of spoons fish. So when it comes to looking at different spoons out there on the market, those are the two main characteristics you really want to keep in mind, is that bass are either going to like something that falls really fast or really slow. They're going to want something that's really big or really small, or somewhere in between. A lot of different options. Now, real quick, before we get into the rest of the video, I wanted to give a huge thanks to Mike over at Mikey Balls Fishing. I know that you guys know him, absolutely love his YouTube channel, but later in this video, you actually see me doing some fishing, and I was actually down in Alabama, and Mike let me stay in one of his Airbnbs. Now, if you happen to be going down to Guntersville, or maybe even fish Smith Lake, his place is the perfect setup for a bass fisherman. It was super clean. There's plenty of room for you and several buddies. And one of my absolute favorite things, I could leave my boat hooked up to my truck the entire time right there in the driveway. So I'm gonna leave a link down below in the description. If you guys are making a trip in the near future, I would highly suggest checking it out. Let's talk next about the equipment that you wanna fish a spoon with. Now, I have messed with my equipment a lot over the years. I have tried a little bit of everything. I've tried like flipping sticks. I have tried straight fluorocarbon. I have tried braid. I have tried a little bit of everything. And I have really kind of settled on using kind of the same system, but really adapting the rods to what size and heaviness of the spoon that I'm using. For example, you can see right here, this is that smaller 4-inch nickel spoon. It's only like 3/4 of an ounce. It is very light when thinking about a lot of spoons out there on the market. The Ben Parker spoon is like 3 ounces, okay? I am not going to use the exact same rod and reel that I use with this little spoon as I do with the big spoon. But the thing that is the same is the braid to fluorocarbon that I'm going to use and the rod action. Not necessarily the rod power, but the rod action. So let me explain that for you. I have really settled on using a 30 or 40 pound braided line to about a 2-foot fluorocarbon leader. And I like 20-pound fluorocarbon for this. Now, the thing about it, I don't use the fluorocarbon leader because I don't want the fish to see my line. I use it because if you use straight braid on these things, which you can do, at times that braid is so limp that it's easy for the braid to hook around that bottom hook. So you make a long bomb cast out there, the braid kind of gets hung up on the hook, and then you fouled up your hook. It's the exact same concept that I use when it comes to fishing a topwater bait. Like when I'm fishing topwaters, I use a really small fluorocarbon leader. Exact same principle when it comes to fishing a flutter spoon, but I like that braid to 20-pound fluorocarbon, and I wouldn't go any lighter than 20-pound fluorocarbon even when you're using the smaller spoons. But that's my line configuration. When it comes to the rod, like I said, I like the same action rod no matter what type of spoon that I'm using, which is what I'm going to call a moderate action. A moderate action has a little bit more of that parabolic bend to you. And having a little bit more of that parabolic bend, I'm telling you, it really helps you to keep these fish pinned. It really helps you to keep these fish from throwing that bait. And one of the most important things that you can do also, this is kind of besides the fact when it comes to equipment, when you hook into a fish on a spoon, kneel down, get your knee, literally put your knees on the front deck of the boat, get your rod in the water and try to prevent that fish from breaching the surface. Because when they breach the surface, that is when they're going to throw it. If you can simply keep them down, they will not be able to throw that spoon near as well. Now, if the fish is really, really far out, it can be very difficult to keep them from coming up out of the water. But if they get pretty close to the boat, there are times where I see that line starting to rise up in the water. I stick my rod like all the way down, like literally to the reel handle into the water, and I can keep that fish from breaching the surface, which in turn helps me to keep a lot more fish on. Now, when it comes, again, let's talk a little bit more about the rod, because the rod is the most important part of this. I like a parabolic bending rod, but depending on the size of the spoon that I'm going to use one that is either maybe for example, this 3/4 ounce spoon, I use a medium power rod. This is my exact topwater rod right here, 7 foot 2 inch, medium power, moderate action rod. This one right here, this is another topwater rod, but it is a medium heavy power. It is just a little bit bigger. I really like it with those 5 and 6 inch spoons. Now, if I'm going up to a really big, big spoon like the 8 inch or the 6 inch, again, I want a parabolic moderate action rod, but in this case, I'm gonna use either a heavy or extra heavy power rod. I want something that's going to be able to really manage the weight of these big spoons really well. But again, the line configuration is the same. 30-pound or 40-pound braid to a 20-pound fluorocarbon leader, now, and with all of these. Now, one thing that I also want to talk about when it comes to the reel, you can use anything in that 7 to 8 gear ratio range. I've used both of them. I have no problem with them. I'm leaning a little bit more towards the 8 gear ratio. Now, one thing that is very important to understand, if you get on a bite where you're throwing these bigger than average size spoons, we just talked about how to fight the fish a little bit, keeping your rod in the water. The other thing with these really big spoons, crank them in. Like, I put a tremendous amount of force on the fish when I hook them with these big things, with these big spoons. I am literally just wrecking them to the boat, just cranking them straight in the boat. And the concept is very similar to fishing a big glide bait. If you guys have ever heard some of the best anglers talk about fishing a glide bait, same exact thing. They will tell you to wrench them things in, flip them in the boat. It is very similar when you're fishing a big spoon like this. Wrench them things in. The hooks that are on these things are usually like a 2/0 or so, and we're gonna talk about hooks here in just a minute, but you can put a lot of power on them and without them flexing or bending out, and that's fine. I'm gonna even if it's a 5, 6, 7, a big fish, I'm going to absolutely crank that thing in as fast as I can. And a lot of times, if I don't have a guy there with a net, I am going to flip them right into the boat. That is typically the best way to fight these fish and land these fish. Now, one thing I do want to talk about that I think is very, very important with the spoon, I like spoons with a feather. As you can see here, these have feathers. This one right here, the River to Sea one, does not have a feather. Now, I can tell you that I have caught a lot of fish on a flutter spoon that doesn't have a feather, and like you would think that it doesn't make a big difference. What I have noticed though is that when you are catching fish, especially on the big spoons, you want to give that fish a target. And having the feather on there really gives the fish a target to see. As that thing is falling and fluttering down, they will hone in on the hook. You don't want them to hit up on top. You don't want them to hit, and you will see the teeth marks on this thing are always towards the bottom when you have a feather on it. So I'm a big believer in the feather on a spoon. I think it really helps you to hook and hold a lot more fish. Now, one thing that you will see on a lot of different spoons is a stinger hook like this. There's a little stinger hook that actually comes on this thing. Honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of stinger hooks. I really want, when I hook into a fish, I want to hook him on the main hook. And I don't see that my hookup ratio goes up anymore when I have a stinger hook at all. I have caught some fish where they only have the stinger, but I'm not a big believer in it. I personally just like a configuration just like this. You have a swivel going to a big split ring, and then you have your spoon, and sometimes I will add a second split ring in there if the fish just seem to really want to be throwing that bait. But a lot of times, as long as it's a fairly big split ring, it'll give that hook enough twisting ability that they won't throw it. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is how to work a flutter spoon. There's really one main way that I work this, but there's a lot of like different nuances and variations within that way. And then there's a completely separate way that I work this. So let's talk about the main way that I work a spoon, which is kind of a rip it off the bottom motion and then let it fall on a semi-slack line. So a lot of times when I go out there, I'm gonna throw that bait out. I'm gonna let it fall all the way to the bottom where I think maybe the fish are, maybe it's a school of fish. And then what I like to do, this is just kind of something that I do that works really, really well for me. It may not work for you, who knows? But I use a right-handed reel. I will keep my left hand on the reel like this, and I use my right hand to kind of push the rod up and snap that spoon really, really high. So I literally just go like this. And what I do a lot of times too is I'll actually use my left hand and I will catch up the slack just like that, how I kind of just reel it like that. And then I just keep that motion all the way to the boat, letting it rip up. And a lot of times when the fish hits it, I do the exact same rip. I just rip it into that fish, he's on there, and I just start reeling him in, cranking him in, keeping that rod really, really low. That is the #1 way that I fish a flutter spoon. Now, like I said, there's a lot of like little nuances in it. And what I mean by that is that some days out there, those fish want it ripped extremely hard, where it's a hard hook set up. And there's other days where you just kind of need to pop it up. There's also days where you're fishing around a giant school of fish, and those fish, once they get in competition of it, you don't need to rip it that hard at all. You can literally just cast it out and just kind of rip it to the side really easy. And so there's a lot of different small little nuances within fishing a flutter spoon that you can do in one of that certain way. Now, another big thing that I use, or another big way that I fish the flutter spoon, which is a little bit sneaky, guys that fish it will have caught fish like this, but they don't always know that this is a way of catching them, if that makes sense. But a lot of times, you will find that fish respond to this best by simply reeling it in, just reeling it all the way to the boat. So I will like cast it out again to where that fish, that school is. I'll let it get right there to where the fish are, and I just start reeling it back. And when you reel this thing, it is dancing all over the place. I mean, going all crazy, and the fish will just come up there and tag it. You don't need to rip them. You don't need to do anything. You just start reeling the thing. And one of the biggest ways that you will find that the fish want it that way, as opposed to kind of ripping it, is you're gonna find days where, like this has happened to me so many times, where I'm reeling the bait in to make another cast, and a fish comes up there and hits it. When they start doing that, start casting it out and just start reeling it in. It's a lot less taxing on your body, and you can simply just reel it right over them. They come up there and grab it, and you got a fish. Now, I have been fishing a flutter spoon well before using any kind of forward-facing sonar like a Mega Live 2 that I have in my boat. So this is something that can absolutely be done without forward-facing sonar. Now, if you have FFS in your boat, it does make it a little bit easier to see how those fish are all reacting to the bait. It just allows you to be able to adjust a little bit quicker. But I'm actually gonna end this video with actually taking you out on the water, doing some flutter spoon fishing, so you guys can kind of put everything together. So let's go ahead and jump out on the water. Go, baby. Nice spotted bass right there. Get around that bait, and they're definitely a little bit more active. That fish seemed to want it actually moving. So look at that, beautiful. Love it. There he is. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Right there, baby. That was pretty cool. Oh, gosh. Let's go, baby. Okay. Let's go. Nice spot. Pretty fun. That was a group of them. I figured if I could get them to turn on the bait, I'd get one. But hold spot, man. Spots are so much fun. There he is. That feels like a better one there. Come on, baby, stay on. Oh, gosh, darn it. Oh, that was a freaking hammer, man. Dang it. That was like a my biggest spot ever is a 3.5 pounder. That may have just been it. Dadgummit. Fish are moving away. Very fast pace, so I'm just trying to get ahead of them here. Might be the cast there. There they come. There he is. Oh gosh. That is feels like a good one. Man, there was a bunch of them there. Don't jump, don't jump. No. I'm gonna get this fish in the boat. I'm gonna try to keep tracking these fish. Is that them? Where'd they go? There they are. Look at that. Look at that fatty, dude. There's a whole mess of them. Look at them on the screen there. I'm gonna try to keep... Once they see your bait, though, they tend not to like it. There we go. Seems like the bigger groups of them aren't giant. Good grief almighty. Oh my gosh, this fish is trying to kill me. These spots are mean. I mean, the good and solid 2 pounders for sure. I really wish I would have got that one. Man, this is freaking fun though. Here they come. There we go. Oh. Gosh. That is so much fun. Should have been weighing these guys, but I'm just having a freaking ball. That one pooped over everything in creation. Gotta love that though, man. They are. See, now that's a big old school, and I doubt I'll be able to get any more out of it, but I'll see. They're still, I don't even know where they all went. They're all pretty much right under the boat. They seem to want to go right under the engine. There's 3 big ones right there though. Now, a flutter spoon is by far one of my favorite ways to catch a bass, but I know that there are some situations where it just doesn't work out. But in the summertime, there is one bait that I think is the most consistent lure of all time, and I actually did a full video on it right here. So if you guys enjoyed this video, I think you will like this one next. Don't forget to check it out. Also, I will see you guys in the next one.